Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're in our 29th year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they've accomplished in the past, what they're working on, what they're planning for the future. They might be poets, they might be novelists, they might be journalists, and occasionally we have other brands of artists on too. We have had on musicians, actors, sculptors. So if you have an idea for a person who might be a good guest for the Writer's Block, writer or other kind of artist, watch for our address at the end of the show. We would love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that this production is an original production of 1623 Studios for and about Cape Ann. It's a cable access service, very valuable to the general society here on the Cape, and it's not something you get with Dish. It's with cable, so stick with cable. Don't be tempted to leave us. You should stick around with the Writer's Block. I'm very happy this evening to say that we do have a writer, a novelist by the name of James Masciarelli, and he is going to talk about his exciting new book, Beyond Beauport, with a very, very nice cover, and explain where he got those ideas. James Masciarelli is originally from Worcester, went to Westboro High School, where he was on a near championship basketball team, then went to Holy Cross, where he continued as an athlete. He was a wrestler at Holy Cross, one of the wrestling crusaders. His career continued after Holy Cross, and I'm going to read from his profile on the back of the book. He majored in psychology and classical literature at Holy Cross with advanced graduate study in psychology and holds an MBA from Babson College. He resides now in Naples, Florida, and his home port, Gloucester, Massachusetts. James Masciarelli, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thanks. Good to be here, John.
Thank you for coming up. I know you were recently in Florida. Mm-hmm. You sort of commute on the Gloucester-Naples shuttle.
Well, I had to get down there for a start of my Southern tour for my book. So I was at the Southern Independent Booksellers Association, huge event with lots of new novels, and it's a marketplace for all of the southeastern states. And I get to meet a ton of other authors, and the keynoters were fantastic. I also did a gig at a place in Coral Gables. It's called Books and Books. They have a chain from Miami out to the Cayman Islands, down to Key West. So it was fun.
So it's doing well.
Yeah.
The book, Beyond Beauport, is set in Gloucester. And I've got to say, and I read it, you seemed like a native. You know Gloucester well. And you know Gloucester's social background well, kind of combining your love of your new city, Gloucester, mm-hmm. with your background in sociology. What drew you to Gloucester, or Gloucester as a location for this novel, when you started to get the ideas?
Well, I came to Gloucester as a kid to come to the beaches with my parents, and it's been in my blood for a long time, since I was not even 5 years old. And a lot of day trips up here, and eventually in my early 30s I moved here and made it my home. So I've been here just under 40 years now, and recently we became Florida residents. But so we're back and forth, and it's just such a special place. We all love it here. Everybody's an artist here in one way or another, it seems. So it's not a new thing with me.
Your affection for Gloucester comes across
Thank you.
Very, very strongly in this. I hope that is the promotion for the book doing well?
I'm very pleased with it, yeah. I mean, I was really happy to see what Jimmy Tarantino would say, Old Gloucester and New Gloucester, because even though you've been here almost 40 years, myself, and you longer than me, I always feel like I'm still a bit of a newcomer, right? Not a seventh generation, right. Member of a fishing family or whatever. But so I was really happy that the community got behind the book, and received it well. Both
Well, you
the
lived in Gloucester for a good number. Some of my students would point out to me that I was not raised in Gloucester.
Oh, they'll point it out.
I would tell them, yeah, but I've been in Gloucester longer than you've been alive.
Right.
So
doesn't matter, John.
Cool the jets.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that there's some of the women in the book, Shannon, is a third generation.
At least.
And so people respect that.
Right.
And her
multi-generation
Gail and
daughter of a fishing family. That's right.
Yeah.
My character.
Well, go ahead.
Basically, I was an entrepreneur and a business guy, mostly around management, consulting, and so forth. And I took a sabbatical in the mid-'90s, sold my business, and said, I wanted to start writing. I wrote a nonfiction book at the time, did very well, but I went back into a different form of consulting work for a few years, doing a lot of executive coaching and organizational change and things of that nature. And then I basically hung it up and started writing fiction. And I ended up, I have 2 screenplays in a drawer. I have several short stories I want to revisit. But what really got my attention was the fact that I had observed for a number of years that after traveling all over the world, meeting lots of women in business and so forth, that the women were different here. They were special. What was it? I was trying to figure out what it was. And particularly the women that worked in any waterfront job, whether it was as a bartender or a cook or engaged in the fishing industry or packing or cutting fish or lawyers or whatever. And so I decided to figure out what it was that made them so unique. And in the back of my book, there's an author's note that goes into detail about my process. But essentially, I decided to be a little scientific, and I interviewed 24 women from ages 24 to 84 that were born and bred in Gloucester. And the ones that really struck me as having the most insight about Gloucester and where it's been and where it is and where it's going were the women in midlife. And this composite character grew in my head and my heart, and I fell in love with her.
And Shannon's in her
Shannon
early 40s.
Clark, yep, 46. And so you have an adventure story that was born without an ending, but with this great character of, kind of a feisty, politically incorrect, straight-talking, fun lady that likes to fish, could probably outfish any guy in town, a little bit of a poet, a little bit of an artist, has tried every business she possibly could while she raised her kids. And that's kind of the composite character I came up with.
I read the notes, and you talk about the importance of women holding families together for over generations, despite problems, drugs and crimes, things
and
like that.
all the wars and the people.
Why did you decide to center on women and make a woman, Shannon, the protagonist, a female, and a lot of her buddies are prominent in it too.
Absolutely.
Although the second most important character, her uncle,
is her uncle Patrick, right?
Patty Clark. Why did you want to write from a point of view of a woman, and was that difficult?
Okay, so as I said, I was fascinated by these women. When I first came to Gloucester, I didn't know anybody in 1981. And, I basically was a gym rat, so I came to the gym, which now is the fitness zone. I've been a member there for all those years. And that's where I met a lot of these folks. I mean, the working class folks in town, and a lot of them were women, and they really do, they really can. And today, their form and training, they're the best. They really are. So when I revisited this idea of this female character, I just felt that there was a story to be told there. And it wasn't until my wife and I went down to Florida to a museum that was hosting an exhibit on female seafarers and pirates. I said, there's my story engine. So that's where my Gloucester woman is, her ancestral quest is going to come together. And that's when I knew where I was going to take the book. One
of the reasons I was fascinated by that was I had a recent guest on the show who who was a poet, wrote poems about female lighthouse keepers
on
the East Coast.
Yeah.
And and that's the second book fairly recently I've dealt with where the central figures are women.
And you asked me about, well, was it difficult? And I would say this, people would have called me a man's man and a mama's boy. Okay, so it's like my mother could do it all. She was very, very talented. So, we're all human beings. I don't think it's all that crazy to be writing about somebody who's of the opposite sex or, somebody that comes from a different background. And so it was kind of fun for me. And trying to get the voices right for a female protagonist and her friends was important. And they're all made-up characters. And what worked for me was I had a lot of women readers. That was important to me. And I had 4 female editors along the way as well that I hired. So, and 1 male editor. And then when I got my publishing contract with Kohler, they beat up on it. So it's been a lot of iteration over a long period of time. But the women readers helped a lot. So, no, it wouldn't happen that way. Try it this way.
You mentioned a lot of background work and research work, maybe before you even thought where it was going. Mm-hmm. But how long, and our viewers are always interested in how long did it take you to conceive, write, publish, and then begin to sell the novel?
A to Z, 7 years. And that's a lot longer than it would take for me going forward because I really had to learn the craft of writing fiction. So I really did a deep dive on that. And really thinking about things like literary devices and the arc of the story, the character arc, the turning points, and all the stuff. And you have to read in your genre, and I love sea stories, so that's helpful. I've always enjoyed adventure stories. And what's nice about an adventure novel is you can hang all kinds of stuff off of it. It's not like a single genre, really. You've got campy scenes, you've got adventure scenes, you've got conflict.
Wait, it goes from Gloucester, and then you're in the Caribbean, Carolina.
A lot of settings in this book. It begins, as you said, with the Gloucester Schooner Festival of 2012, and it completes in the Gloucester Schooner Festival of 2013. And 2012 was the year that the Bounty came in. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and I have a scene in there about, through Shannon's eyes, how she reacted to the Bounty and a premonition that she had that something was definitely wrong. So I tried to bring in a lot of what was happening in those times. And what was interesting in trying to connect her to her pirate and seafaring ancestry. Anne Bonny, right, the wild Irish female pirate from the 1720s. And I became obsessed with this idea of what happened to Anne Bonny after the pirate trial of 1720 in Jamaica.
And she was still a very young woman.
21 years old, maybe 22, right around there. So, no, actually, she was 22 because she was born in 1698. That's great. Anyway, the official records say that, after they don't know what happened to her after that. But a famous pirate historian, David Cordingley, who authored Under the Black Flag and Seafaring Women, a bunch of other great stuff. He said that there was a James Burley that she married after her father sprung her from jail in Jamaica by bribing Jamaican officials.
Yeah.
And
still works.
Got her to go back to Charleston to his, and now a plantation. And so her dad became rich. And she didn't particularly like being on a plantation. She was the illegitimate daughter of the maid in the household of William Cormac, her father. And she actually dressed as his male law clerk and would come to dinner. So it's the maid's daughter and his daughter. It was Anne Bonny. So she had an identity complex right from the get-go, right? And he was disgraced, divorced, and came with Anne and her mother, Mary Brennan, to the United States on a ship. And he found a way to get wealthy in the triangle trades. So Anne and Shannon have this tight connection as an 11th generation descendant of Anne Bonny. So my obsession with Aunt Bonnie took me way out of the story, as well as all the other characters that I was trying to connect her from. The James Burley, who was in Cordingley's book, there was no information on him in Charleston. So I started looking at the Burley family coming from England, and guess what? They ended up in Ipswich. And then I followed the descendants of the Burleys, and I go through the Harridan family of Gloucester, some famous sea captains,
the captain you mentioned,
and all the way back to Aunt Bonnie.
They magically
I never put the 11th
with,
generation.
Shannon Clark.
Right. I never put the 11th generation chart in the book because I want to drive the pirate historians crazy. But I'll be honest with you. I had to kind of like trick it out a little bit though.
Well, it's fiction.
Absolutely,
Right? It's not a documentary.
Yeah, but
it's not historical.
Right. And all of the historical pirates in there are real. Mildly fictionized in dream sequences and lucid dreams, and she toggles back. Shannon does. But and then the fake pirates, but actually based on what really goes on today,
you mean
that they get hijacked.
Franco and Mateo.
Exactly.
They're
based on what really goes on. I had to study what's going on with today's triangle trades.
Well, we still have these old 17th century, 18th century images of piracy.
Oh yeah.
But it's guys with machine guns on outboards moving 50 miles an hour.
Somalian pirates. They're everywhere. And one of the questions raised by my book really is, do we all have an inner pirate to manage? I think we do. It's part of the human condition.
Well, we've all got everything in us.
Yeah.
You hope you learn a little better.
Right.
One of the characters there, the second most important character, is Patty Clark,
right.
Shannon's father's
brother, his younger brother. That's
younger
right.
brother. Is he based on you?
Let's just say that my friends have said that. I don't think I'm anywhere near as grand as Uncle Patrick, but I would say he's a massive projection of my better self. But his total biography, being in Vietnam as a chief petty officer, eventually becoming a merchant marine, and then kind of this a bachelor seafarer for a good number of years that we learn in the book. Has a Jamaican common law wife and
his
a
daughter,
common law daughter, mixed race.
Who's very
she's charming.
Good friend of Shannon's.
They become very good friends. But Shannon had no idea that she had these family relationships. So part of the story, John, is that she's on a quest for her pirate and seafaring ancestry, but also as a young child, she wanted to be a sea captain. She would look out to sea like this red-haired woman
that
she is, and Aunt Bonnie, looking at a square-rigged ship and thinking about how much she would love to have been a sea captain. It never happened, Life got in the way, a lot of issues that she had to deal with.
I'm going to frame this to make sure our viewers get the Beyond Beauport is a book about a woman in her 40s in Gloucester, born and raised in Gloucester, who goes on adventurous cruises with her godfather, Patrick Clark.
Yes.
And I don't want to.
And there'll be some spoilers. I'll do a few, but she wants to learn how to become her childhood dream is realized. He teaches her how to become a sea captain. So that's a big part of the story.
And that has to do with courage and history, but also technically.
Oh yeah.
You got to know the ropes.
And the third great character there is the vessel itself, the brigantine ship, Second Wind. And of course, she's kind of in midlife and thinking about what her next act is going to be. The Second Wind, I chose a brigantine because the brigantine vessels, which preceded schooners, were really the pirates' favorite ship because they were great, very agile in coastal as well as deep blue.
Shallow draft.
They're very, not that so much, it's just that their maneuverability and agility, and the fact that they had a high bow and a high aft deck with a low waist where they could basically take a yardarm and move horses, cargoes, or guns off the middle, to another ship. And so it was just, they could carry heavy guns. They could, they were very good being outfitted.
Yeah.
So pirates loved brigantines. So that's what we created there.
So I don't want to reveal any secrets or spoilers, but she does find adventure. She finds everything she wants, and it's a treasure hunt. I'm not going to say whether they find any treasure or not, but it's a treasure hunt, and there is a plant, I think, at the end of the book for maybe the possibility of a follow-up novel.
Let's just say this: I got lost in the history stuff. I have enough material for 3, but I can tell you that I have a lot of other jealous lovers of projects that I've been anxious to write. So I think I want to take a little breather before I come back to Shannon Clark again. She took over my life.
Well, 7 years is a long time to be
is.
dedicated to one project.
Yeah.
But was it intentional that you mentioned towards the end that maybe a couple of these bad news pirates, Matteo and Franco, are going to be out of jail?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought,
the spring is loaded.
He's got the second one already in the first draft.
I think I have it in me. There's no doubt about it. But I want to work on a collection of short, wacky stories first. Take a little freedom on some things I want to write about.
I mentioned before we went on that I knew you were working on Gloucester's 400th in some of the preliminary work. And you said you'd like to say a couple of things about what's going on.
So I don't want to make a big deal out of what I'm trying to do. I made a suggestion to some people, Peter Anastas and Eric Archer, and here at 1623, and I put together a memo of the idea of curating some live stories from people across our community that might make its way into the memorial booklet. And Peter's excited about it, so we're going to be communicating with the 400 committee about it in depth. And I've already started to interview a few octogenarians that are fishing captains and get some of their stories. And we have so many other people that we'd like to interview. And I think with this studio we might have a chance to interview some young people, midlife people, and some people that have perspectives at different slices of life in our community. And I think Voices of Gloucester would be a good way to do it. And there's many things the 400 committee's going to do, and the website, and which will have a companion site for the 400 in perpetuity for the town to have a rich amount of information. Whereas in the past, you've got, I actually over the years have bought all the booklets going back. So I have the 150, the 200, the 250, the 300, and then the smaller works for the 350. And, those are big tomes, most of them, were. And I don't think that's the direction they want to go in. I think they want more of a live multimedia kind of a site, which makes sense today.
Yeah, well,
but I'd love to see a small booklet, maybe 120, 200 pages with, some vignettes from different people around the community today. And good
the technical advances between the 350 and 400 now,
Huge.
let alone 300, have been just breathtaking. Right. And where print is just not where it was. It's not dead, but it's a multifaceted world.
So either way, the information will be there. But I'd still like to see a booklet. People still like to hold a book.
Well, there's got to be something, sure. But I think the record's going to have to be the solidest. The solidest, is that a word? The most solid record's going to have to be digital.
Right.
Enduring,
perhaps. Until the EMPs hit, the electro-pulse generators, and, electronics have fried. Yeah. Now where are we going to be? Anyway.
It's time to put on my hat. You were good enough to give me some swag here before the show started. So I'm going to put on my Beyond Beauport hat to make sure that everyone knows what we're talking about here.
So the next time, John, you write about the Crow's Nest and the Beauport Hotel, talking about not having the scotch at the Beauport because it was too early in the morning, and having the one at the Crow's Nest, next time it'll be the two of us. We'll bring our hats, and after a few drinks, we'll both be way beyond Beauport.
It's a good idea. You're talking about that column about the Crow's Nest and the...
Yeah, I remember you wrote that. It was cool.
I enjoyed that. I want to repeat to our television audience, we've been talking to James Masciarelli about his very, very fine, readable, and exciting adventure novel, sea novel, starring a woman, Shannon Clark, that takes place in Gloucester. It's based in Gloucester. It takes place up and down the East Coast in the Caribbean, the high seas, and it's pretty exciting read. And where is it available, Jim?
Well, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent booksellers, of course our local bookstore.
Local bookstore.
Pretty much ubiquitous at this point, yeah.
Okay.
We're only 8 weeks in, so a lot to do. Yeah, get out there. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you very much for coming to the Writers' Block.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sharing this exciting book and this adventure, Shannon's adventure.
You just have to promise me we're going to have a chance to get to know each other better.
Well,
the Bard of Gloucester here. I've got to learn more.
You'll have to come back for the next book, and also after the movie comes out, you come back again. There'll be three shows.
We can hope. We can hope. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank our TV audience too for being with us. If you've learned something about James Masciarelli's novel Beyond Boatport and the importance of women in fiction and history, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.